Being president of the United States is similar to being a rock star. There are many women who want to sleep with politicians because they find the power they hold to be very sexy and appealing. There is arguably no more powerful position than President of the United States. The entire world seemingly has their eyes on the president at all times. It is a lot harder to cheat on your wife as a president nowadays because of the internet, cell phone cameras, and 24/7 media coverage. Here are 6 presidents who cheated on their wife while holding the highest office in the United States, and a president who had an illicit affair but didn't technically cheat on his wife. Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt was a very handsome man, especially in his younger years. Roosevelt could have had a choice of a wide variety of women to marry even before he got involved in politics, but he chose to marry Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor was a distant cousin of his. On March 17, 1905, future President Franklin Roosevelt married Eleanor Roosevelt, and she was given away by current president at the time and family member, President Theodore Roosevelt. The marriage, like all marriages, had their struggles. Confirmed adultery on the part of Franklin Roosevelt did not occur until 13 years after his wedding, when he began a 30-year relationship with a woman named Lucy Mercer. The relationship began in 1918, and she was with him when he died in 1948. Mercer was Eleanor's secretary when Franklin met her. Roosevelt's wife Eleanor learned of the affair and was very upset and hurt about it. Franklin actually told her he wanted a divorce. Eleanor told him to think it over carefully to ensure he was sure. Franklin's mom convinced him that he would be cut off financially from the family money if he was to get a divorce. Nobody in the Roosevelt family had ever been divorced before. In Eleanor's mind, the only thing worse than his cheating was the thought of divorce. In the end, Franklin Roosevelt stayed with his wife and didn't get divorced. He was able to keep his political career. His wife Eleanor was able to keep from getting divorced, but she allowed Franklin to lead his life. They no longer shared a bed, and she knew that he was continuing to see Lucy Mercer. In addition to being romantically involved with his wife's former secretary, Lucy Mercer, he was also romantically involved with his own secretary, Margaret LaHand. Eleanor was also romantically linked with a man named Harry Hopkins. She spent a lot of time with her bodyguard Earl Miller, and they became close friends. Although it appears that relationship may have just been platonic, she was in love with him. The most interesting person Eleanor was involved with was a lesbian named Lorena Hickok. They became extremely close friends and wrote love letters to each other. Warren Harding. Nana Popham Brinton, nicknamed Nan Brinton, was the mistress of Warren Harding. A year before Harding took office as president, Nan Brinton gave birth to a child, Elizabeth Ann Blazing. Elizabeth's father was Warren Harding. Nan kept the secret that President Harding was the child's father until 5 years after his death, when she released a book. At the time, she did not have any way to prove that Harding was the father of her child, and most people doubted her claims. In 1964, 250 love letters written by Harding to Nan were discovered. This helped people to believe her claim, although many still doubted her claims. It was not until 2015 when DNA testing proved that Harding was the father. In the tell-all book that Nan Brinton released, she told of a story where she and Harding had sex in a coat closet inside of the White House. Today, President Harding has 3 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. They all live in Oregon. Nan wasn't the only woman he was sleeping with, though. Harding also had a 15-year affair with Carrie Fulton Phillips. That relationship came to an end when she blackmailed Harding. Phillips was loyal to Germany and did not want Harding to vote in favor of war with Germany. In the summer of 1920, immediately following his acceptance of the Republican Party nomination, Harding disclosed his affair with Mrs. Phillips, also disclosing that Phillips was in the possession of hundreds of love letters he had written to her, many on Senate stationery. He had reported this to the Republican Party in order to help avoid a potential scandal. Reportedly weary of a scandal involving an affair, as well as Phillips' support of the German government, the Republican Party urged Phillips and her husband to keep their travels abroad a private matter. Mrs. Phillips responded by dictating terms under which she would consider the party's wishes. In return for Phillips' silence on the matter, the Republican Party offered to pay the way for an extended tour of Asia and the Pacific Islands, as well as an annual stipend to Phillips for the remainder of her life. Harding also had many other affairs after being married. The first time he cheated on his wife was only 3 years after they had gotten married. It involved a lady named Susie Hodder, who was his wife's best friend. He also had an affair with Augusta Cole, whom he knocked up and then forced to have an abortion. He also had an illegitimate child with Rosa Hoyle. He also had to pay off Grace Cross, whom he had an affair with, in order to buy back the sappy love letters he had written her so she couldn't blackmail him. Warren Harding was quite the player, but John F. Kennedy was still a smoother ladies' man. John F. Kennedy. Unlike Harding's mistresses and affairs, everybody seemingly knows that Kennedy was a huge player. We will probably never know all of the women Kennedy slept with. He slept with multiple women, both in and out of the White House. Here's a sampling of women that Kennedy banged in the White House. Marlene Dietrich was a German actress who visited the White House and had a quickie with Kennedy. Mimi Alford was a 19-year-old intern who met Kennedy when she was swimming in the pool at the White House. He swam up to her, introduced himself, and then invited her for after-hour drinks. He gave her a tour and then seduced her. They had an 18-month affair. Mimi Alford wrote in her biography that JFK dared her successfully into giving oral sex to an aide in the pool. The affair with JFK did not become public until 2003, when classified documents were unsealed. In 2011, Mimi released her tell-all book, which is chock full of salacious details. JFK spent a weekend in Palm Springs with Marilyn Monroe at Bing Crosby's house.
Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
He had sex with too many other women while president to show them all here, but he had even more sexual encounters in the years leading up to his presidency. With so many women scorned, maybe there was a second shooter on the grassy knoll. Lyndon Baines Johnson. Most people think of Bill Clinton or JFK when they envision a playboy president, but Lyndon Baines Johnson cheated on his wife too. Although JFK is more famous for his affairs, Lyndon Baines Johnson may rival the sexual conquests of JFK. President Johnson had numerous affairs. He was stressed out over Vietnam, and sex helped to alleviate some of his stress. One of the many ladies he had sex with was Madeleine Brown. She actually became pregnant in 1950, and Johnson was the father. Although Johnson did not become president until 1963, he and Brown carried on the affair for almost 20 years. She revealed her relationship with the President Johnson in 1982. Historians are still not in agreement about whether Madeleine Brown's son was fathered by Johnson, but there is no arguing that they did have an ongoing sexual relationship. Dwight D Eisenhower. Dwight D Eisenhower had an affair with a former model from Great Britain named Kay Summersby. Eisenhower had went overseas to check on how things were going during the war, and Summersby was his personal driver. She seemed to like to drive sticks. Bill Clinton. Everybody knows about Bill Clinton and his oral sex from Monica Lewinsky. He even inserted a cigar tube into her. Yeah, we all know about her. Monica was pretty cute. I wonder if Hillary is voted in as president, if Bill will get another intern of his own. Bill tried to be discreet, but ultimately he was impeached for lying.
But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
Bill Clinton has also been connected with many other women, including Dolly Kyle. Kyle states that Clinton told her he has had sex with around 2,000 women.
Play on, player. Play on.
In addition to Dolly Kyle, he's been connected to Juanita Broderick, Paula Jones, Kathleen Willey, Elizabeth Ward Grayson, Sally Perdue, Lincola Sullivan, Connie Hamzy. There have been many other names brought up, but if we covered all of Bill Clinton's sexcapades, then this video would be longer than the Roots miniseries. Thomas Jefferson. Good old Thomas Jefferson fathered 6 children with one of his slaves. 4 of the children survived. Jefferson later freed all of them. Thomas Jefferson's wife died in 1782, and he did not become president until 1801. We still need to mention Jefferson because when his wife was a young child, her mother died and she was raised by 2 different stepmoms. A few months before Martha died, she made Jefferson promise never to marry again, telling him she could not bear to have another mother raise her child. Although he never married again, he did develop a relationship with Sally Hemings. Back then it was legal for rich white dudes to own slaves and have sex with them. You just had to be discreet and keep your ebony fetish to yourself. Sally Hemings not only helped raise his kids, but also provided companionship for Thomas Jefferson. The relationship seems to have started when Jefferson was living in France for a couple of years. One of his daughters that had stayed in America had died of whooping cough, so he sent to have the other daughter join him in France. Accompanying her on the trip was none other than Sally Hemings, who was only 15 or 16 years old at the time. So, which of the presidents do you think was the biggest scandal while they were in office?